I trusted my children more than anyone. So when they begged me to sign over my property, I believed their words. Dad, we'll take care of you forever. But the moment my pen touched that paper, they changed. Calls went unanswered, doors stayed closed, and I realized I had been nothing more than a stepping stone to their greed. What they didn't know was that I never sign anything without a backup plan. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I still remember the sound of the clock ticking that evening. It was one of those old wooden clocks Maria had bought years ago, the steady tick-tock echoing across the living room walls, almost mocking the silence that had settled between me and my two children. The house felt heavy that night, though nothing had changed in its walls. Same curtains Maria had sewn, same wooden coffee table I'd built with my own hands, same family portraits hanging proudly along the hallway. But in that moment, it felt like I was sitting in a stranger's house, surrounded not by family, but by two negotiators who had come to claim what wasn't theirs yet. Michael, my eldest, leaned forward, his elbows pressing into his knees. He had my sharp jaw, but not my patience. He always wanted quick fixes, shortcuts. Beside him sat his younger sister, Anna, quieter but with eyes that darted nervously between me and the stack of papers on the table. Dad, Michael started, his tone careful, rehearsed, like he'd practiced in the mirror. We've been talking, and it just makes sense. You're getting older. Handling the property, the bills, the tenants, it's too much for you. He reached for the folder. Papers neatly arranged, legal jargon swimming across them. A transfer of ownership. My land, my house. The only thing Maria and I had built together, ready to be signed away. Anna nodded softly, avoiding my eyes. It's not that we don't trust you, Dad. It's just, well, what if something happens? It'll be easier if everything is already in our name. That way, we can handle things for you. No complications. I stared at them. My own children. The same kids I had carried on my shoulders, the same kids I had worked double shifts for, the same kids Maria and I had skipped meals for just to make sure they had shoes for school. And here they were, speaking like bankers, like strangers with polite smiles but hungry eyes. I felt the pen slide closer to me on the table. Michael's hand had pushed it forward. He leaned back, as if the job was nearly done. Dad, this is what's best, he said firmly. No more stress on you. We'll take responsibility. You just get to rest. Rest. The word hit me like a blade. Rest sounded less like comfort and more like dismissal. Like they were saying, your part is over. Hand us the keys and fade away. My throat tightened. Memories rushed in. Maria and I, standing on this very plot of land when it was nothing but soil and broken fences, dreaming of what it could become. The nights I came home with calloused hands, too tired to eat, but still smiling because every brick, every nail, every coat of paint brought that dream closer. And now, my own blood wanted me to erase myself from it. I picked up the papers. My hands steadied though my chest burned. I skimmed the words, pretending to read. Truth was, I didn't need to. I knew what it said. Everything with my name would no longer be mine. Everything I had bled for would belong to them. Dad, Anna whispered, almost pleading, please, just sign. We're family. You can trust us. Trust. The word twisted like a knife. Maria used to say trust was like glass. Once broken, no matter how carefully you try to put it back, the cracks will always show. I looked at their faces. Michael, impatient, tapping his foot, glancing at his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. Anna, guilt flickering in her eyes, but not enough to stop her from nodding at me, urging me to finish it. I set the papers down. My voice came out low, almost calm. Do you both really believe this is for me? Or is it for you? Michael shifted, irritation flashing in his eyes. Dad, come on. Don't make this dramatic. It's practical. You don't understand how hard it is for us too. We're just trying to secure things. Secure things. That's what he called it. My life's work reduced to a transaction, a convenient transfer. I leaned back in my chair, my gaze drifting to the photo above the fireplace. Maria's smile stared back at me. She had passed 5 years ago, but in moments like this, I swear I could feel her presence. I wondered what she would say if she were here. Would she defend them? Would she see through their polished words like I did? I imagined her voice, "Don't sign, Roberto." Not like this. Not out of pressure. Remember, once you give away your foundation, you have nothing left to stand on. The silence stretched. Finally, I picked up the pen. Michael's eyes lit up, victory flickering across his face. Anna exhaled, shoulders dropping in relief. But instead of signing, I placed the pen down carefully beside the papers. "I'll think about it," I said. Their smiles faltered. Michael frowned. "Think about it? Dad, there's nothing to think about. This is a logical choice." I shook my head. If it's so logical, it'll still be logical tomorrow. And the day after, if you're asking me to hand over everything I built, then you can give me time to think. Michael's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, but he didn't. Anna touched his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. Reluctantly, they stood. Michael grabbed the folder, shoving the papers back inside, his movements sharp, angry. "Fine," he muttered, "but don't take too long. You're not the only one affected here." I watched them leave, their voices fading down the hallway, the sound of the front door slamming echoing through the house. And then silence. I sat there alone, staring at the empty chair across from me, Maria's chair. My chest felt hollow. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing their words. Rest. Trust us. Think about it. Over and over, until the words lost meaning and became sharp whispers clawing at my skull. But in that sleepless night, a seed was planted. If my children wanted to play this game, if they wanted to treat me like a burden standing in the way of their inheritance, then maybe it was time I stopped being the fool they thought I was. I whispered into the darkness, almost as if Maria was listening. They think they can outsmart me, but I've survived harder storms. If they want my land, my house, my name, they'll have to fight for it. And when the dust settles, they'll regret ever underestimating their father. And that, my friend, was the moment the war began. The weeks after I signed those papers were quieter than I had ever known. Not the peace-filled quiet of a Sunday morning, when the kettle whistles and the smell of coffee lingers. No, this was a kind of silence that presses against your chest, that makes every tick of the clock feel like a reminder of what you've lost. At first, they still came around. My eldest son, Daniel, visited twice that month. He walked the property with his hands in his pockets, pacing the boundary like a surveyor. He spoke in clipped sentences about renovations and potential renters. He barely looked at me. When I offered him tea, he waved it off. His words had weight, but his eyes were empty. My daughter, Emily, sent me messages, polite, detached. "Dad, hope you're well. Dad, make sure you take your medicine." Not once did she ask if I was lonely. Not once did she sit by my side the way her mother used to. And then there was the youngest, David. He called twice, both times late at night, both times with the rushed tone of someone checking off a list. He asked if the neighbors had been bothering me, if the garden was still manageable. His voice held no warmth. It was as if they had all signed me away along with the property. I tried not to resent them. I reminded myself that I had raised them to be ambitious, to work hard, to value independence. Maybe I had succeeded too well. Maybe, in giving them everything, I had taught them that I was just another resource to be managed. The first month's bills came, and for the first time in decades, I hesitated before opening them. The house was no longer mine, at least not on paper. The property taxes were redirected. The utilities shifted into accounts that didn't bear my name. I lived in the same walls, slept under the same roof, but legally I was a guest, a tenant in the life I had built. One evening, I overheard Daniel on the phone. He thought I was asleep, but the old walls carry sound. His voice was low, sharp. "If we sell now, we can clear the mortgage on Emily's place. Don't tell Dad yet. He won't understand. He'll cling to the past." Cling to the past. That phrase echoed in me. Was that what I had become? An old man clinging to photographs, to Sunday dinners, to the smell of my late wife's bread rising in the oven? Maybe to them, the land was just numbers on a page. But to me, it was every shovel of dirt, every sleepless night worried about harvest, Every Christmas morning when the children unwrapped gifts we could barely afford but always provided, the betrayal didn't come all at once. It came in fragments, like shards of glass that cut deep the more you try to gather them. Emily stopped returning my calls. David missed my birthday. Daniel showed up one morning with a folder of plans, asking me to move into a smaller place. Just a convenience, just until renovations were finished that I refused. That night, I found myself sitting by the fire, staring into flames. I tried to remember the last time we had all sat together as a family, not just in the same room, but together, laughing, arguing, living. I couldn't remember. The years blurred. Their faces and my memories looked younger, softer, untouched by greed. The property began to change. Workers arrived, men I didn't know, wearing reflective vests and muddy boots. They spoke to Daniel, not me. They hammered, drilled, tore down fences I had built with my own hands. One day I came home to find the old oak tree gone, the one Emily used to climb, the one that had shaded every family picnic. They said it was unsafe. I stood in the empty patch of soil, staring at the stump. My chest tightened, and for a moment I thought my heart might give out. I whispered, "That was mine," but the only reply was a sound of sawdust swirling in the wind. By winter, the visit stopped. They didn't need to check on me anymore. They had what they wanted. The loneliness grew teeth. Nights stretched longer, meals tasted bland, and the walls seemed to lean inward. I caught myself talking aloud, just to hear a voice in the room. I spoke to my wife's photograph more than to my children. Still, I kept notes. Every call, every missed promise, every careless word. I wrote them in a ledger, not out of spite, but out of survival. Because deep inside, a small flame still burned, the belief that truth has weight, and someday they would feel it. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, official seal. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents, notices of intent. My children were preparing to sell. Not rent, not renovate. Sell. And where would that leave me? The letter didn't say. That night, sleep evaded me. I walked the halls of the house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood I had refinished with my own hands. Each room whispered memories. The kitchen where birthdays were celebrated, the hallway where Emily once scribbled her height in pencil on the wall, the porch where my wife had waved me every morning before I left for work. I ended up in the study. The fire burned low, the ledger open before me. I stared at the pages filled with my careful handwriting. Dates, times, phrases. Proof. Proof that I wasn't mad. Proof that I wasn't exaggerating. Proof that love had been replaced by hunger. And then, for the first time, I allowed myself to think of revenge. Not anger, not violence, but justice. A way to remind them that a father's love is not infinite when twisted into chains. The thought scared me, but it also steadied me. The betrayal was almost complete, but so was my resolve. I closed the ledger, placed it in the drawer, and whispered to the dark, "You may have taken the land from me, but you will not take the man who built it." For the first time in months, I felt sleep come gently, not as an escape, but as a promise. Tomorrow, I would begin again. The day after I whispered those words to the empty house. "You may have taken the land from me, but you will not take the man who built it." The sky itself seemed to change. A storm rolled in, heavy clouds pressing low over the fields, thunder rumbling like an omen. I stood on the porch, watching sheets of rain soak the earth I had once called mine. For a moment, I wondered if it was God's way of washing the land clean of my children's betrayal. That storm lasted 3 days. And in those 3 days, not one of my children called me, not to check on me, not to make sure the roof wasn't leaking or the old generator was still working. Nothing. I realized then that I had not just signed away my property, I had signed away their last shred of responsibility toward me. On the 4th day, the sun returned. But so dim my resolve, I began walking the property lines, even though technically it wasn't mine anymore. Every fence post, every patch of soil, every tree, I knew them better than my own reflection. My boots sank into mud, and as I stood by the oak tree at the edge of the south field, I swore I heard my father's voice. "This land is your blood, son. It remembers who tended it. Don't let anyone take that from you. I knew what had to be done. The betrayal had layers, like rot spreading unseen. At first, my kids pretended things were normal. They dropped by with forced smiles, asking if I needed groceries, reminding me they'd take good care of the place. But I could see the greed glinting in their eyes. They weren't caretakers. They were landlords waiting for the tenant, me, to move out or die. One afternoon, my eldest son, David, showed up in a brand new truck. Chrome wheels, leather seats, the whole package. He parked it right where I used to split firewood, dusting the shine with a proud grin. "Like it, Dad?" he asked. I looked at the truck, then back at him. "Bought it with your paycheck?" He smirked. Something like that. That was the moment I knew. He'd used the land as collateral, borrowing against the very soil my hands had built up. My sacrifice had turned into his tea. A YNY daughter, Melissa, wasn't much better. She came by the house with shopping bags dangling from her wrists, designer clothes, perfume, shoes she'd never wear more than once. "Dad," she said, lay her hand on mine like some kind of saint, "you'll love how we're managing everything. You won't have to worry about taxes or repairs. It's all handled." I stared at those shopping bags, the way her bracelets jingled like coins. Taxes and repairs? No, my money was handling her closet. And then there was my youngest, Daniel. Sweet Daniel. Or at least he used to be. He'd always been the soft-spoken one, the boy who used to follow me around the barn asking questions about engines and hay bales. But now, when he visited, his eyes darted around like a thief casing the place. He spent more time staring at the walls and fixtures than talking to me. "Dad," he said one evening, "you ever think about moving to one of those retirement communities? They've got activities, nurses, everything. You wouldn't have to worry about this big old house anymore." I smiled, but inside, something twisted. Retirement community? No. He wanted me out of the way, out of the house, out of their lives. It was then that I decided. If they wanted war, I'd give them war. But I wasn't going to fight with fists or fury. No, I'd fight with something they couldn't understand. Patience and preparation. I started small. Each night, I wrote everything down in a notebook. Their visits, their words, their purchases. I became a historian of their betrayal. Every receipt they bragged about, every careless comment they made, it all went into the record. At first, it was just for me, a way to keep sane, to make sense of the madness. But soon, I realized it could be more. Evidence. The turning point came when I visited the courthouse under the pretense of renewing my fishing license. While I was there, I struck up a conversation with the clerk, an old friend from high school named Raymond. He leaned close over the counter and whispered, "You know, some of those papers your kids filed, they weren't done right." My heart kicked against my ribs. "What do you mean?" Raymond shrugged, lowering his voice. "Let's just say if someone were to challenge the validity of those transfers, they might have a case, especially if the person signing wasn't fully informed." I walked out of that courthouse with fire in my chest. They thought they had me cornered. But paperwork, sloppy, greedy paperwork, might just be their undoing. From that day forward, I became two men. To my children, I was a weary old father, fading quietly into the background, grateful for their crumbs of attention. But in the shadows, I was an architect, building a case brick by brick. I made copies of every document I could find. I spoke to neighbors, gathering stories of how I'd maintained the land, paid the taxes, made the repairs, even after signing it away. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to construct a different picture. One where their claim to my property wasn't as solid as they believed. But betrayal is a poison that spreads. One Sunday, I caught David arguing with Melissa in the driveway. I stayed hidden on the porch, listening. "You always think you're entitled to more," David hissed. "Just because Dad listens to you." Melissa shot back. "I'm the one who convinced him to sign in the first place. Without me, you'd still be broke." Their words cut me, but they also gave me strength. If they were fighting each other, they weren't united against me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my old notebook open, the pages filled with their betrayals. I looked at my wife's photo hanging on the wall. She'd passed years before, but in that moment, I swore I could hear her voice. "Don't let them win," she seemed to say. I closed the notebook, my decision clear. The next phase of my plan would not just be defense. It would be offense. The SO I called in a favor. My old friend Lawson, an attorney now, sharp as they come. We hadn't spoken much since my wife's funeral, but when he answered the phone, his voice was warm. "Thought you forgot about me, old man," he said. "Never," I replied. "I just need your help. It's about my kids." By the time I finished telling him, Lawson was silent. Then he said, "Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything." The following day, I laid my notebooks, my copies, my evidence across his desk. Lawson leaned back, adjusting his glasses, and let out a low whistle. "They're not just greedy," he said. "They're careless. We can work with this." "For now," I told him, "I want to keep it quiet. Let them think I'm broken. Let them get comfortable. The more they brag, the more rope they give me." Lawson smiled. "Then when the time comes, we'll tighten the noose." I left his office with a weight lifted. For the first time since signing those cursed papers, I felt hope. Not just hope, I felt power. Back at the farm, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat by the window, and watched the sunset burn across the fields. My children thought they'd buried me under their greed, but they had only planted a seed. And seeds have a way of growing. I had planted the seed, and now it was time to let it grow. Patience had always been my greatest weapon, one my children never learned. They lived fast, spent fast, wanted fast. But I had lived through droughts, through winters that starved the earth, through years where patience was the only way a man survived. And now, patience would be the rope that would hang them. I end the weeks that followed my visit to Lawson. I carried on with my daily life as though nothing had changed. I drank my morning coffee at the kitchen table. I swept the porch. I fed the stray cat that lingered by the barn. But inside, I was different. I was a man with a plan. David still rolled into the driveway in his shiny truck, bragging about new deals. Melissa still strutted in with her shopping bags, perfume filling the air before she even opened her mouth. Daniel still dropped hints about retirement homes, circling me like a vulture waiting for its meal. But I no longer felt helpless in their presence. When they spoke, I didn't hear their voices. I heard evidence. Every word they said was another brick in the wall I was building against them. One evening, Melissa sat across from me, sipping wine she had brought. "Dad," she said with mock sweetness, "you really should stop worrying so much. We've got all under control. You just enjoy yourself, okay?" I smiled at her, but in my mind, I wrote down her words. We've got all under control. Arrogance, recorded, remembered, soon to be exposed. Their greed, unchecked, began to eat at them. David's spending grew out of control. The truck wasn't enough. He started flashing jewelry, watches, even talking about buying a second house. The banks began circling. Debt collectors called when he wasn't home, their voices sharp, urgent. Melissa, on the other hand, grew restless. The thrill of new clothes wore off, and she started whispering about investments, schemes that promised quick riches. She was gambling with money she didn't have, chasing a high she couldn't hold. And Daniel, my quiet boy, grew darker. One night, I caught him outside the barn, pacing, muttering under his breath. He didn't see me in the shadows as he kicked at the dirt, his voice shaking. "It's supposed to be ours. Why won't it feel like it's ours?" That was the difference between owning land and stealing it. When you build something, it roots itself in you. When you steal it, it slips like sand to your fingers. Lawson and I met often, always in secret. Each meeting, he grew more confident. They were sloppy, he told me, flipping through copies of the documents. The signatures, the witnesses, the filings, it's a mess. If this goes to court, their case collapses. I leaned back in the chair across from him. But court takes time. And my children, they're wolves. Hungry. They won't wait quietly. "Then let them howl," Lawson said. "The louder they howl, the easier it'll be to bring them down." I like that. Let them howl. The breaking point came one night in late summer. I was sitting on the porch when David stormed up the driveway. drunk, his truck swerving before he killed the engine. He staggered toward me, face flushed, eyes wild. "Dad," he slurred, jabbing a finger at me. "We need more money. The land isn't producing enough. We need to lease it out. Developers. Big offers. You like that, wouldn't you? Seeing houses instead of crops." I stood slowly, meeting his drunken stare. "This land isn't yours to sell." His face twisted with rage. "It's ours. You signed it. Don't you forget that." Melissa's car pulled in just then, headlights cutting across us. She jumped out, heels clicking, voice sharp. "What's going on here?" David spun toward her. "He's holding back. He's sabotaging us." I watched his brother and sister clash, shouting, accusing, spilling poison all over the porch. Daniel arrived minutes later, trying to quiet them, but he only made things worse. Soon all three of them were yelling, their voices overlapping in a storm of anger, and I just stood there, silent, watching the children I had raised unravel. That night, when they finally stormed off, leaving me alone in the silence of crickets and shadows, I knew the time had come. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit, not for a funeral, though it felt like one. For a rebirth, I drove into town, met Lawson at the courthouse, and together we filed the papers. Motions, challenges, affidavits, the works. My children thought they had buried me under signatures, but signatures cut both ways. That evening, I invited them all to dinner. I cooked their favorite meal, just like their mother used to: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread. The house smelled like home, warm and inviting. They came, suspicious but hungry. David slumped into his chair. Melissa scrolled on her phone. Daniel fidgeted with his napkin. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork and cleared my throat. "I know what you've been doing," I said softly. Their heads jerked up. "I know about the loans, the gambling, the lies. I know you use my land like a piggy bank. I know you've been circling me like vultures, waiting for me to die." David laughed nervously. "Dad, come on." I cut him off. "I've been patient. I've been silent. But no more." I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of every note, every receipt, every crooked document they had filed. Their faces drained of color as they flipped through it. Melissa's voice trembled. "Where did you get this?" "From living in this house long enough to know nothing stays hidden forever." Then I leaned forward, my voice like steel. "I filed a challenge. The property is no longer secure in your hands. Every lie you told is now under scrutiny. And when the court is done with you, you'll wish you had never touched what wasn't yours." Silence. The only sound was the tick of the old wall clock. David's jaw tightened. "You can't do this. We're your children." I met his stare. Children don't betray their father. Thieves do. From that day on, their empire of lies crumbled. David's debts came crashing down when the bank learned collateral was under legal dispute. They repossessed the truck, the jewelry, even his second house. His pride was stripped bare, leaving nothing but a bitter man scrambling to pay back what he never earned. Melissa's investments imploded. Creditors hounded her, demanding repayment for money she didn't have. She sold her designer clothes for pennies, her perfume bottles gathering dust in pawn shops. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed, replaced by shadows of desperation. And Daniel, my quiet boy, folded under the pressure. With the land slipping away and his siblings turning on him, he drowned in guilt and shame. One night, he came to my door, eyes red, hand shaking. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long time before answering. Sorry doesn't rebuild what you tried to burn, but maybe it's a start. Months passed. The court ruled in my favor. The property, my land, my house, returned to me. The judge's gavel came down like thunder, and in that moment, I felt years of weight lift off my shoulders. My children sat in the courtroom, stunned, broken. For the first time, they looked small, not powerful, not entitled, just children again. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked past them without a word. Outside, the sun was shining. Now I sit on my porch again, the field stretching before me. The land is mine, not just by law, but by blood, by memory, by sacrifice. My children don't visit much anymore. Maybe shame keeps them away. Maybe greed is looking for a new victim. I don't know, but I do know this. They learn something they will never forget. Family is not built on signatures or property deeds. It's built on respect. And the moment you trade respect for greed, you lose everything. I raised my glass of whiskey to the horizon, the sun dipping low. They told me family was everything. I whispered to the wind. Turns out it is, just not in the way they thought. And with that, I smile, because I didn't just win back my land. I won back myself. If my story teaches anything, let be this. Family is not about what you can take, but about what you can give. Greed may fill your pockets for a season, but it will empty your soul for a lifetime. Respect your parents, because one day you'll wish you could hear their voice again. Honor their sacrifices, for they bled quietly so you could live loudly. Build your own future with honest hands. Don't steal the foundation someone else laid. Wealth earned through betrayal is like sand. It slips through your fingers no matter how tightly you grip it. A father's love is not endless, but it is deep. Don't poison it with selfishness. Children who betray their parents forget that one day they too will grow old, and when they do, they will pray for the loyalty they once denied. Remember, land can be lost, money can be stolen, but trust, once broken, may never return. Greed divides, but respect unites. Selfishness destroys, but love sustains. The true inheritance a parent leaves is not property, but wisdom. If you throw that away, you have thrown away the only wealth that matters. So, if you remember one thing from my story, remember this. Betrayal might bring short gain, but respect brings eternal peace. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to True Revenge for more powerful stories of betrayal, justice, and lessons that hit home. Every day, we share real tales that remind us why truth always rises above lies. Click that subscribe button, join our community, and never miss the next story that just might change the way you see family, trust, and revenge.